everyone, it's Evelyn, and this week we're going to go over my top 10 focal flowers in the bouquets that I created from last year. But before I get into that, I do want to remind everybody that starting for this year, I'm going to be doing a 5th video per month. And unlike my Saturday videos, this video will be on the Wednesday following the last Saturday. It might actually push it into the beginning of the next month, depending on where we are in the year. But for January, it won't. It will happen on January 29th, which is a Wednesday. And this video will be a Q&A where I answer questions in all the previous videos for the month. So all the January videos, questions that show up in the comments section, I will pull all or some of those questions and answer them in the Q&A video for the month that it's referencing to. So on January 29th, it will be the January Q&A. So make sure any questions that you have, you do put down in the comments section. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they are. So now let's get on with the top 10, which is actually a top 11 because my 10th is a tie. I can't decide which one of these I want to say I prefer to the other. I thought long and hard about it, and I just couldn't make up my mind, even though one of them, which is my camellia, didn't actually give me any blooms this year, which is why it's actually down on the 10th. And if that, I can't leave it off because I've loved it every other year, and I can put it down to a mistake that I made because I didn't know that the one night that we dropped to a ridiculously low temperature of minus 10 Celsius, not minus 10, minus 17 Celsius, would affect the buds as much as they did. And half the buds never opened up or fell off. The other half, when they did open up, the flowers were really small, and if you touched them, they shattered. I can avoid that for all future years by knowing that this happens and covering the bush and protecting the buds if there's going to be another night that drops to that low. We do not get down that low every year. This is like a once every, I think it was just the second time in the last 10 years that we've had a temperature drop that low. So it's very irregular for it to get that cold. And it was a real shame. I really missed them, which is why I do want to have it in my top 10, because I really, really missed having those flowers available around the end of April to make bouquets, because there is no real other focal flower that I can make a bouquet with at that time. Sure, a lot of you do it with tulips, but I don't use tulips in bouquets. I sell tulips in 1-gallon pots because I think that that is more profitable for me to do it that way. And the cherry blossoms are starting to bloom at the same time, and I pair those with the camellias. And the foliage would be the deep burgundy tones of the sand cherry leaves just starting to open, as well as the deep glossy green leaves of the camellia. And that's all I need in the bouquets, and they look absolutely stunning, and people love them. And I really missed having them, so I really had to include in my top 10, even though I didn't have them available this year. Now, the one it tied with was a new one for me this year. And again, I was going, well, should this really be in the top 10? Because it's actually not even a flower. But I decided, no, it's being used as a focal flower. And I thought it looked absolutely stunning. And that is my Jacoby Little Pumpkins used in bouquets as though it was a focal flower. And as you can see here, and of course, I used them in the latter half of October. That's when I used it. I could probably start using them sooner because the Canadian Thanksgiving is in the second week of October, and of course pumpkins are part of that. So I could be using Jacoby Little Pumpkins for most of October in my bouquets, and I just think it looks beautiful. I mean, you can see it's paired here with a Spartacus dinnerplate dahlia and a Wanda's Capella dinnerplate dahlia tucked in behind it. And then I've included it with some dried stilbe and dried poppy pods and glossy green laurel leaves. And it does act like a focal flower. And that's because I've got it on a stem, that I've got it in the bouquet on a stem. So it's part of the bouquet. It's not just kind of sitting in there. And I love that look. I love that look way more than using the little pumpkins and putting flowers on top. Very, very excited to have tried that this year. And I'm hoping I will have success with my miniature pumpkins to do lots of them this year. I didn't have great success with it last year because I thought of it a bit too late in the season and I got them going too late. So most of the pumpkins were still way too small when it came time to use them. But in fact, I really only had this one. I had one pumpkin that I could use, but that was enough to sell me on it. So that was my tie for the 10th focal flower to use in my bouquets. Absolutely love it. So the 9th flower that is in my top 10 focal is also a new one for me this year, and it is the Gladiola Espresso. And the reason it's only number 9th and not farther up is because I ordered minimum of 80 corms from my wholesaler. I got 75 because one of the packages of 5s was completely empty. And of those 75, I only ended up with about 12. They all came up with the leaves, but only about 12 of them bloomed. So my success rate on getting the flowers was poor. And I will again put that down to human error, deciding that I probably didn't have them planted, located in the right spot. So what I'm going to do, I dug them all up. What I'm going to do is try a few this year's, just take those 75 corms that I dug up and plant them all over the place to see where they do best. So if there's any areas where they still don't bloom, those areas will be nixed for the following year. And the areas that they did bloom, I can double up on the number of corms that I plant in that area and slowly, succinctly get it down to where they do the best. And that's just trial and error and learning knowledge on the way as I do it, because I've never grown glads before. I loved them in the bouquets. I absolutely loved them. I did not realize how much, well, much like the Jack Be Little, I did not realize how much I would love them in bouquets. So you can see in this, and the other thing with the Glad, which was really interesting, is I started them all, I believe, late March. Don't quote me on that. And I just planted a few each day over the course of a week and a half, just to stagger the blooms, because I realized, they're not going to be like a day and a half apart. It might take a little bit longer. But they didn't bloom. The first one bloomed in, I believe, July, and the last one bloomed in October of the 12 that came up. So they were even though they're all planted in the same spot, they were very, very inconsistent in the time they decided to bloom. But I quite liked that because it allowed me to see how they worked with quite a different range of secondary flowers or supplemental focal flowers. And I found it partially the color, but it paired so beautifully with everything. So yeah, I absolutely loved it. It's only my number 9 because, again, as I said, out of 75 corms, although I bought 80, I only ended up with about a dozen flowers, which did put those dozen flowers to be a little on the pricey side, except that digging them up and planting them again so they're reusable and you don't have the cost of the corm the next time. I mean, they were so fast and easy to dig up. It took almost no time whatsoever. So there's virtually no time spent digging them up. So labor versus dollar cost, it's cheaper to dig them up. It's up, 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 up. Anyway, so this is the bouquet that I decided to feature with them in, and as you can see, it's a well, if you know, my snowberries, which is paired in here, bloomed. They didn't bloom their berries, but came in September. So this is a September bouquet, and I've got it paired with a second flush of Costa Silver snapdragons. You can see a red lemon sunflower off to one side and an orange sunflower off to the other side, and the snowberries, and that deep, beautiful burgundy red of the Glad in the center of that bouquet, and the way the large blossoms go into the closed peak like that just rises slightly above the bouquet, just adds so much interesting visceral texture to it that, yeah, it had to make my top 10. It's just an absolutely stunning addition to my garden. Very, very happy I decided to experiment with those. Now, my number 8 top 10 focal is something that I wasn't sure I would call a focal. Ball and decorative dahlias are, for me, something that I've always considered a secondary flower to my dinner plate dahlias. And the reason I decided no, they need to be called a focal is because, first of all, they bloom before the dinner plates, and I can use them as a focal flower in the week or two they're blooming before the dinner plate dahlias start blooming. But also, as the season gets late, and for this year, my season went straight through the Remembrance Day weekend, the dinner plate, well, all the dahlias, are slowing down in their production, as are all the flowers in the garden, just because of the daylight hours. There's so few of them. I mean, when we get down to the shortest day of the year, we're down to about 8 hours of sun, and middle of November is only a month before that. So there's not a lot of daylight hours as compared to the summer. So everything slows down in its growth, not growth, in its bloom. Um, and dinner plate dahlias also tend to get smaller in size as you get into the shorter daylight hours. But the ball and decorative dahlias don't get smaller in size. So the dinner plates still stay larger than the ball and decorative dahlias, but there's less of a difference in their sizing. So I found that in the latter half of October and the first half of November, I was using the ball and decorative dahlias in bouquets as a focal flower, as much as I was using the dinner plates. Now, these are the picture that I put up was the 12 ball and decoratives that I mostly used. And this bouquet that I'm showing you here was actually taken, put together on September 21st. So it wasn't in October or November. But here you can see it's the Edinburgh, which is a decorative dahlia, which is the lighter purple. Beside it is Arabian Nights, which is the really deep dark red. There is an Astilbe just tucked underneath around the corner, and that's the one that's sort of a deep crimson with the frosting on the back of the leaves. And you can see I'm actually using the ball and the decorative dahlia of the Edinburgh. Some people call it a ball, some people call it a decorative. It kind of is in between. But it and the Arabian Nights are being used as focal flowers in this bouquet, along with a orange sunflower and a red lemon sunflower. I've got some rose bonbon cosmos up the top, and again some dried Astilbe fronds, as well as Costa silver snapdragons. And this bouquet really shows why I need to add it into my top 10 focals, because they add so much beauty to the bouquet. And while I'm not using them as a focal in the long days of the summer months, I'm certainly using them as summer wanes and fall begins, as well as just before the dahlias open up. And that's why they made it into my top 10. Now, if you're enjoying this video so far, and you really like what I'm showing you and telling you about the flowers, then don't forget to hit the like button down below at the same time, and let me, because that will let me know that you're actually liking this video, and I really do appreciate it. So the next focal flower we're going to talk about is one that comes on early on in the season, and that is ranunculus. And it makes my number 7 because I don't find that it is as important to me as all the focal flowers that come after it. The amandine yellow and the bonbon, in fact, I'm not sure I'm going to grow next year. I did not like that harsh yellow, and I did not like that harsh red. Loved the amandine white, salmon, marshmallow, and Pauline. Those are beautiful, beautiful colors that I loved using in bouquets, but they weren't the focals that I really looked forward to using in bouquets. And oftentimes how I used them is paired with the either Globe Master or Ambassador Oleum. And I'm just going to show you this really. And I also was, unfortunately, it was a time of year that I was really quite busy with life, and I hadn't gotten into the habit of taking pictures of all of my bouquets. So I actually don't have very many good ranunculus bouquets, which might be why it's lower on the list. Because if I'm looking at the photos of the bouquets that I took last year of them, there weren't any that really specifically stood out to me. They were all a little, yeah, okay. And that's my fault probably, because the really nice bouquets probably never got photographed, because there's clearly going to be lots of nice photographs of the ranunculus. I'm showcasing this one because it's kind of funky. I've got yellow kale flowers poking at the top, a black button bachelor's button, that's hard to remember to say, poking up the top. I've got some parsley umbels poking up the top, a hair allium. I have a foxglove curling around the side of the Globemaster allium, some feverfew flowers that I used, and then some ranunculus that I collared the allium with. And it's a totally different and strange looking bouquet from what I would normally do, but it's really quite funky looking. And it does show how the beautiful texture of the ranunculus, that softness of the petals, almost papery softness of them, compared to the harshness of the petals of all the other flowers in this bouquet. And so it shows its beauty off quite nicely. But yeah, I didn't have a whole lot of good photographs of them, which is why it's really, really important to photograph your bouquets, because when you go back, you need to be able to find ones that you like. And can do a much better job of photographing the ranunculus bouquets, certainly this upcoming season. Even if a lot of the other ones I don't do as good a job on, I have a good bank of photos of them, but I don't of the ranunculus. Now the next focal flower is number 6, and again, it's another new one for me. This number 6 on my list is Firelight Hydrangea, and I bought it at the garden center, I believe, was it July 1st or August 1st? August 1st. Fell in love with it immediately. I went to the garden center specifically because they just got their truckloads of various different types of hydrangeas in, and I wanted to see what all the various different ones looked like in person rather than just in pictures or on videos. And I really fell in love with the Firelight Hydrangea. I loved the soft pinkness that fades into white within all the little petals that show up in each one of the panicles. And pink hydrangeas are really rare where I live because our soil is quite acidic. So there are hydrangeas in a lot of people's gardens, and they're all blue. We do not consider blue hydrangeas anything special where I live. They're actually kind of like run-of-the-mill. But a hydrangea that has that pink petal in it with that whiteness in it as well. White hydrangeas you do see as well, but not the ones that have the pink to white. And I just fell in love with it because it was so unusual for our area, and clearly so easy and versatile to work into bouquets because it wasn't such a strong pink. And in fact, later on in the year becomes quite a deep rosy color, that I just had to have one. And now I really would like to have more than one bush. I cannot plant them in the garden. There's no space for them. I have to keep them in pots, which will keep them smaller in size, because the size of a root ball in a lot of respects will determine the size of the plant, even if it's a tree. So if the root ball can't support past a certain size, it simply won't grow past that size. So I'll never get a large plant out of a hydrangea in a pot. So I may need to have another one or two of the Firelight hydrangeas because I do love them so much. And in this case, the bouquet that I'm pairing it with, I've got they're flanking in this particular side of the bouquet, a Cornell Bronze and a, I have forgotten the name of that, Sweet Fabian is the pink ball dahlia. So those two ball dahlias nestle in between the Firelight hydrangeas, and then I've got some green poppy pods poking up the top, and you can just see a teeny little bit of the purple marjoram or oregano poking up above the Sweet Fabian ball dahlia, and of course there's laurel leaves down around the bottom. And the only reason I didn't use more Firelight hydrangeas in the bouquets that I made this year is because I didn't have more to use. So I'm really, really looking forward to having longer stems next year so that I can cut more of the flower heads and use as many as possible, because I just really, really loved using the Firelight hydrangeas in bouquets this year. So the next flower on my list is not new, but is new. And the reason I say that is because I had grown it for a few years and it always made my top 10 worst flowers because the varieties I grew I really, really didn't like. And that is snapdragons. I gave snapdragons one last attempt this year, and as you can see by the picture that I had put up, they flourished. They did, I mean, they had thick stems, they grew tall. Each one of the little snapdragon heads on each stalk was big and lush and gorgeous. And I learned why I didn't like them last year, because last year there was, or the previous year, because the previous year there was one that I did like, and that was Orleans Early Lemon, which is the yellow one that you can see in this bouquet. And I realized the difference was is all the other snapdragons that I had tried were in the sunset kind of color range, because that's what everybody seemed to love. And I didn't like them in that color. I liked them to sparkle in a bouquet, which, as you can see in the Orleans Early Lemon, it sparkles. The paler colors allow the shadows to really be seen, and the changes of the depth of the color, like in the Orleans Early Lemon, you can see the top of the mouth of the dragon is paler than the bottom of the mouth of the dragon, and then there's shadow lines that show where the mouth itself actually is. And that undulation of the yellow and that sparkle of the reflection to the shadow really is what I was drawn to in that one. So I tried two others. And in this particular bouquet, one of them is Costa Silver, which is the just slightly lavendery shade of pink on those other few spikes that are in this bouquet. And it does the same thing. The third one that I tried was Costa Silver, which you saw in a previous bouquet, and it is much the same as Legends Light Pink, except that it is slightly more salmony in color. It actually makes it slightly more neutral because of that more salmony shade to it. If you hold them apart at a big distance, you can't tell which is which, but when you put them side by side, it's obvious. And the Costa Silver with the salmon shade becomes more neutral because the pink has been browned down, whereas the Legends Light Pink with its more lavendery shade of the pink is brighter and more kind of a look at me kind of color, which makes it less willing to pair with a whole range of colors because it is much more demanding of attention than the Costa Silver is. Now, in this particular case, it's paired with Bridal Veil White Astilbe, and anything can be paired with that because it's white. So this is the bouquet that I'm showcasing, and this bouquet was made on June 26th. If you're enjoying this video and you not only like what you've been seeing and what I've been saying, aside from hitting that like button, which I hopefully you did earlier on in the video, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. Really appreciate that. My subscriber count is getting really close to that 1,000 person mark, and I'm really looking forward to the day I hit it. It's just kind of an exciting thing to hit 1,000 subscribers. So, and then of course I can get monetized, which of course is a benefit as well. So please hit the subscribe button if you haven't yet. Really do appreciate it. And now we are going to go on to my number 4 top focal, and that is, again, a pairing, but yes and no a pairing. It's the Globemaster and the Ambassador Alliums. Excuse me. Now, the reason I'm putting them together as number 4 and that I don't think of them separately is because the Globemaster blooms first. The Ambassador starts to bloom after it. It's playing catch up to the Globemaster. They're kind of blooming somewhat at the same time, even though, well, the Globemaster will bloom first, so it will start on its own, and then at some point they'll bloom at the same time, and then the Globemaster will finish and the Ambassador will continue. Now, the thing about them is the only main difference between them is the diameter of the flower. But when they start to open up, you can see in this particular picture how tight those heads of flowers are. The flowers are really tightly together. So they're like this. And as the days go by, I mean, you can practically tell it by the day, they start to loosen up, those little tiny little heads of flowers that form the sphere. And as they loosen up, they also lengthen, which increases the diameter of the flower, and it creates a slightly more airiness to it because they're opening up like that and lengthening. So practically every day, the diameter of the ball of the allium is growing. So you could say, well, the Globe Master has a larger diameter than the Ambassador when it's fully opened, which is right before it starts to finish, but you're harvesting them when they're smaller in size. So depending on what state you're harvesting the Globe Master at, it could be smaller than the later on Ambassador. It could be the same size as the later on Ambassador. The Ambassador will never get as big as it, but there's so little difference in them other than that, that I almost consider them to be the same flower, just with a longer blooming period than it would have if I only planted the one. And in this particular bouquet, I've also got it planted. I've also got it put together in the bouquet with an Atropurpureum allium, which I like, but at this point, with my limited space, is not one that I'm going to grow a lot of. It was one that I tested out. It is flatter on the bottom, so it's more like a half a sphere or a three-quarter sphere, and it's got little green balls at the center of the purple flowers, so it's got actually more of a two-tone effect to it. I like using the ones that I have, but I can't warrant buying more and giving up space that other flowers that are more important to me are taking up. I've also got it paired with a hair allium, parsley umbels. You can see I've got a salmon amandine ranunculus in this bouquet, and a couple of anemones, a sulfide one and a Bordeaux one. I've got a snowberry branch, because I do use the foliage of the snowberries in the beginning of the season, as well as some laurel leaves. And I really love using the Globe Master or the Ambassador alliums as big purple balls in the center of a bouquet, and then just having everything else kind of come out around it rather than having it sit up high. I like having it nestled down. I really like the way that looks. It gives it a much more funky, fun spring flower look, quite different than what you see normally. So the next flower on my list, we're up to number 3 now, and it is my Ito peonies. Now, specifically my Ito peonies, and not herbaceous peonies. I have 8 Ito peonies and 6 herbaceous peonies, which are younger than the Itos. And the Itos are really, this was the first year they were coming into their own to use them in bouquets, where I had lots of them. The herbaceous, not quite so much yet. There's been only a few of them. But the differences I will tell you between a herbaceous and an Ito peony. First of all, an Ito peony is a cross between a herbaceous peony and a tree peony. What it takes from the herbaceous peony is the shape of the plant and the fact that it dies back in the winter. What it takes from the tree peony is the flower size. It's bigger, and if you know me, you know I like large focal flowers. But its stems that come out of the ground are also sturdier. It does not flop. Herbaceous peonies tend to flop with the weight of their heads. It'll sort of like make the stem flop over. Ito peonies don't do that. They have really, really stiff stems. A herbaceous peony, I believe, at maturity produces approximately 30 flowers per plant. An Ito peony at maturity produces approximately 50 flowers per plant. So you can say, well, why would you want to do an Ito peony versus a herbaceous? They cost more. Yeah, they do. But they also require less maintenance because they don't flop. They produce way more flowers, and they do not attract ants. Now, a friend of mine said that the herbaceous peonies need the ants to open their heavy, full, ruffled heads. I don't know if that's true or not. If you know if that's true, because I've never looked that up yet, and I'm probably planning on doing that at some point when I think of it, when I have a spare moment. But let me know if that's true, that the herbaceous peonies have that symbiotic relationship, excuse me, with the ants, that they require them to actually get those buds to open up fully. That would be really, really interesting. If they do, the Itos don't. There's no ant issue with an Ito peony. So the lack of ants, the sturdy stems, the much larger flower heads, and the fact that you will end up with more flower heads per plant, to me, in my tiny urban flower farm, is enough of a reason to have started with them over the herbaceous peonies. And I'm glad I did, because I really, really enjoyed using them. And the bouquet that I'm going to feature, it's with one of the Globe Master, probably Globe Master, because the peonies are blooming, alliums, and I've got it paired with the kale flowers, which on my plant, the kale flowers do all sorts of funky little movements in their branches. So I love the way how that looks in the bouquet. Snowberry branches, some sand cherry branches, leaves. I've even got a long-needled pine in there, which I love using in a bouquet for the texture of it. And there is some of the green, pale green maple leaves in there as well, whose name I forget. And two of the Etopenis. The yellow one is Bartzello, and the other one is, if I reopen up for myself the picture of the peonies, because they all have names on them, it is the Pink Double Dandy. So now we're moving on to the number 2 focal flower in my tiny urban flower farm, and that without a doubt has to be sunflowers for their reliability, their ability to almost customize the size of the flower, and their, if you're planting them regularly, and I do seeds every week, 100 seeds per week is what I did this past season, the length of time that you get flowers to cut from them is second only to dahlias, I think, because dahlias for me have a very, very long blooming period of late June through till whenever the first killing frost was, which was for me just after Remembrance. Well, no, it wasn't even then. I just stopped then because we were into so many heavy rains, and nobody's stopping off at the flower wagon when you got major wind and major rain. And we were in this inundation of wind and rain. So I thought, that's it for the flower wagon. I made it through the Remembrance Day weekend. We're just going to shut up shop now. So the first killing frost, I can't remember when it was, but it certainly wasn't until the latter half of November. I don't think it was that much later, maybe about a week later. So we'll say third week of November. Can't really remember. It was before December, I know that, but it was definitely towards the end of November. But anyway, the sunflowers, one thing that I did wrong with them this year is I decided to only focus on the 4 that did best in my property from the previous year, which was the white light, the white night, the orange, and the gold light. And the only thing that was wrong with that is I got really bored with just those basically 2 colors, of which one was white. So a little later on, I added red lemon into the mix. But I think this upcoming year, I'm going to go back to having far more colors to choose from, because I actually found that quite boring. And in this particular bouquet, you can see I've got the white light, the gold light, paired with yarrow. And the names of these 2 yarrows, I don't know what they are. I have a number of yarrows in my yard, and the only one that I know off the top of my head the name of is Red Vintage, which might be the red one because it's low, and Red Vintage tends to have shorter stems on it, so I can only use it lower down in the bouquet. Just one sec. Excuse me. I had to sneeze. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're on to my number 1. Well, if you've been following me for a while, it's no secret as to what my number 1 focal flower is, and that is the dinner plate dahlias. They are the star of my flower wagon. I have people coming into me in the spring asking me if I have any dinner plate dahlia bouquets, because they don't realize it's just, unless you have a heated greenhouse with lots of the light that you require, there is no way you can have dinner plate dahlias growing in the spring. But people wait for them. They want those dinner plate dahlias. So the bouquet that I'm going to feature here is the one that has AC Loomis off to the one side, which is the crimson one with the white frosting on the underside of its leaves. On the other side of this bouquet is Lindsay Michelle, which has the donut of yellow with the center crimson and the outside of the petals also crimson. I have those 2 paired with a gold light down below. I have white and purple marjoram sitting just above them, and quite a few black button bachelor buttons above that. And that is, what is that bouquet made? I just flipped over to the next picture. That was taken on August 2nd. Now, if you want to know, I mean, dinner plate dahlias are my number 1 focal flower, but in the dinner plate dahlia realm, there is so many choices. So if you haven't grown dinner plate dahlias yet, or even if you have, but you don't know which ones I, for example, think are the best ones to grow, you should really check out this video here. See you next week. Bye, and don't forget to leave some questions down in the comments section. Bye.